Welcome to Yeukai Business Show, UK's premier business show where we feature business thought leaders, high achievers, and industry experts. Today's episode is brought to you by World Outsourcing Solutions Limited, a company that specializes in helping executive business owners with virtual assistant services and business growth systems. Here's your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. It's Trevor Stockwell with you today, and I'm joined by my guest, Kylie Van Luyn. Now, Kylie, as a precursor, before I introduce you, was one of the essential kind of leadership aspects of the subject that we're going to be chatting about today that listeners are going to grab hold of and can run with?
The dangers of overlooking workplace diversity, equity, inclusion, and psychological safety. Wow,
that sounds really good. Yep, such a key thing to chat about as well. So it's going to be really good. I'm looking forward to our conversation. For those that haven't yet met Kylie, she has over 13 years experience in business. She's the founder of Elevated Coaching and Consulting, and that provides multiple services, including leadership and staff development, change management, sustainable business strategies, lots of other areas that all helps business move their profits forward, as well as fulfilling their purpose as well. So lots we're going to dig into, but we're going to focus on emotional intelligence and the psychological safety aspects, particularly as part of her speciality. So thanks for joining us. Welcome, Kylie.
Thank you. Thanks. Great to be here.
It's really good to have the opportunity to chat with you. Maybe just to start with, share a little bit about your journey that's sort of brought you through. You've helped a lot of people in lots of different ways. That's brought you to starting Elevated and beyond. Just share us a little bit about how you've got to where you are now.
Wow, it is, you look back and it's such a long journey, but a big quick snippet. I've spent the last 13 or so years working predominantly in Australia for not-for-profits and community-led organisations. So I started more in the vocational training space, and then quickly realised there was a real need for, I guess, my passion and purpose in helping people from disadvantaged backgrounds find sustainable and meaningful employment. So some of the groups that I've helped in my career through being a leader and leading large teams, but also large employment focus programs, are people with disability, disengaged, and disadvantaged youth, so young people from particular areas in Australia, women as well, refugees, and asylum seekers as well.
Wow, yeah, that's really good, and it's such a key service that you offer, because not enough people are doing it, from what I can see. So yeah, well done. Definitely keep doing it. And you're expanding into the US market now as well, aren't you? Tell us just a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I started Elevated Coaching and Consulting here in Australia a little over a year ago now, about 14 months ago. And we've had great success and been not lucky, I hate to use the word lucky, but I'm very grateful for just the amazing clients and client base that I've been able to build here with the team in Australia. And based on that success, as well as the global need for this type of work, and my passion to go and experience the United States, I launched the company over there in June this year. So lots happening. Going over to the US for a holiday. Hopefully it'll be very much a holiday, time to disconnect at the end of the year for a white Christmas, and then looking to move over to the US early 2023. Wow,
sounds exciting. Well done. That's really good. I know you're going to help people over there as well. Definitely. So maybe such an interesting subject, I find, anyway. You're an emotional intelligence coach amongst kind of helping develop leaders within organizations and sort of individuals as well. We want to sort of dig into the psychological safety aspects of building the right culture, but it starts, the foundation is being emotionally intelligent ourselves, isn't it? As a leader of the company, as a leader of the team, whatever role we find ourselves in, even as individuals at home. What would be some of the things that you would say you've seen people struggle with when it comes to dealing with a good or developing a good level of emotional intelligence within sort of leadership?
I think not understanding that people bring that when people arrive in the workplace, they're one person, and we tend sometimes as leaders not to look at the whole person. And by that, what I mean is people have things happening in their personal life. They have family commitments, they have marital or relationship breakdowns or issues, and we're one person. And I always say to my clients, either coaching clients or consulting clients, we're one human being. You can't separate your professional person, you know, Kylie the professional and Kylie the person or mother. You are one person. You bring your whole self to work. And so for leaders, it's really just trying to understand that first and foremost, which I think it ties into adopting a more empathetic leadership style, and making the time. So I always say to people, you know, time is the one thing, the greatest gift you can give somebody, especially your staff or your employees, because you can never get it back. It's that gift that you give it to somebody, you can't ever get that back. So making the time for your employees, and being visible to them and letting them know that you are there, you're there to support them, you understand them, and you acknowledge who they are as a unique individual. I think that's a big thing, because leaders, the higher up we go in the food chain, so to speak, or the closer we get to the C-suite type roles, the less time leaders have. But I always say your team and your employees, they are your greatest asset. If you don't nurture those employees, and create that psychologically safe workplace and that sense of belonging, and a workplace where people want to come every day, then your staff retention is going to suffer. You might have things like bullying and harassment claims. You know, it just creates quite a toxic culture if people don't feel supported. And when they have grievances, staff, that they can be resolved quite quickly if people feel that there's an open door with their leader. If they feel that there's nobody to go to, grievances, and you would know this, and probably all the listeners too, grievances can turn into something quite serious when they could have been resolved earlier on had somebody felt supported.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's good. Just touching on that last point, the grievance thing, it's like if we don't deal with it well, it will grow on it and it will spread. Discontent amongst the team. Suddenly, you know, work becomes harder as you're trying to motivate the team, because you're saying one thing to try and motivate them, but you're acting in a way that is demotivating for one reason or another. Such a key point as well. And I think as you started to share, one of the things I was thinking, that there's two aspects to the emotional intelligence within a leadership perspective, in the sense of, how am I showing up as a leader and interacting? Am I listening to the team? Am I giving them space to be who they are? But it's also putting myself in their shoes as well, isn't it? What am I like to work with? You know, do I give them space? Do I accept them for who they are as well? It's the wearing each other's shoes kind of regularly is a good perspective, isn't it? As to gauge where we are at any given moment. I think, such a key aspect. And one of the things you touched on as well really is the value in people and giving them space to be who they are. I think that's such a key thing as well. It's easy to, I mean, you're running a business, so you've got a focus, you've got a strategy, you know where you want to go, you know where you want to take your team, but are you helping them help you? Isn't it? I think that's such a key thing. Or are you just barking out orders, expecting people to follow, clocking in and out, and then hit your target? Everything's good. It's like, no, everything isn't good, because people are not happy where they are, and if you're not happy, you're not going to stay there eventually, are you? It's not going to last. One of the things that I think you're really good at, but also be good to tap into more as well, is helping the boss, the team leader, whoever it is within the company that's looking after other people. How can they start to, maybe they're listening thinking, I'm not good at being open, I'm not good at being more inclusive and allowing people, I haven't got a diverse team, I know it's the trendy thing I'm supposed to do to tick the right box and that sort of stuff because of the way the culture is. But it's like, what am I missing out on by not allowing that sort of culture to be built?
Oh, so much, such a diverse talent pool, right? And I think at the moment, globally, the biggest issue isn't just, the great resignation or recruiting or trying to find a workforce that once was there that now we're going, where are all the people? Where is all the talent? It's the retention. And I keep saying to a lot of my clients, focus on your retention strategies. You can't have people coming in the front door but leaving and going out the back door, and all you're focusing in on is the front door. Really focusing in on how are we keeping people here? How are we keeping our teams engaged and happy? And when you talk about creating a diverse and inclusive workplace, the first place I would look would be have a look and review your recruitment practices. Are they inclusive? You can't create a diverse workplace if your recruitment practices aren't inclusive. And you are, like your question, you are missing out on a huge amount of talent and so many different perspectives. People talk about having diversity inclusion targets, and we need to recruit 20 people per year with a disability. Well, that's great, but like you said, if you're doing it to tick a box, that is, you're driven by the wrong purpose. That's not a purpose, in my opinion. You need to do it because you genuinely care. Yeah. And also, you need to do it because your staff at the moment, employees globally are asking their companies, especially big corporates, what are we doing around diversity, equity, and inclusion? It is a buzzword, but what are we doing? Especially large organizations that are making huge profits, where are we investing those profits to make, people with a disability or people from refugee backgrounds, or to include more women in leadership or board level roles? What are we doing? And employees are starting to ask these questions. And so if an employer or a leader isn't focusing on these things, they're not walking the talk, and they're not going to be keeping those staff that really do have a core value that's attached to diversity, equity, and inclusion. So for me, it would be really have a good look at your recruitment practices if you're serious and you're committed, and then have a look at all those beautiful groups of people that are underrepresented, that can bring so much more to your workplace and they can enrich it with their perspectives and their unique life experiences, and they can contribute to your diversity, equity, inclusion journey too. It makes sense. It's good business sense to me, but I think it's just, where do we start is often the toughest question.
Yeah. Which I will ask you in a moment.
That's okay.
You touched on it with the recruitment side of it as well. But also, as you're sharing it, I'm just thinking as well, like for people listening saying, well, I've got a successful business. We're not that diverse, but we're doing really well. The question then is, but how much better could you do if you diversified the workforce? If you had, open to new ideas, new perspectives, and that wraps in really with the psychological safety aspect as well, doesn't it? Which we'll definitely touch on in a moment. But as well as recruitment, what would be the first sort of steps or other aspects where people think, actually, yeah, I know I need to get better at this. What can I do? There's obviously multiple steps to a good strategy that's going to last, but just from what you've seen and how you've helped businesses, any other aspects that will help people kind of start the momentum of making changes?
Be really clear and intentional about what your social impact focus is. So if you have, and I mean, usually I would say to organizations, try and be inclusive of everyone. And it is that is difficult. It's not to say it's not achievable, but if you have a particular social impact focus, you, for some reason, part of your company's mission or values are aligned to gender equality, or having people with disability in your organisation, whatever it is, be really clear about what it is you're trying to achieve, because diversity, equity, inclusion is very broad. So that would be my first part of advice. And the second piece before the recruitment review or recruitment practice review would be, make sure that the workplace is prepared, and this is linked to psychological safety, but make sure the workplace is prepared for when you recruit people in, and you have successfully done that, and you in that process, I guess, of creating the diversity part, make sure you're not starting from scratch once you have a group of new starters coming in as part of your diversity, equity, inclusion commitments, and then you're sort of starting to build the plane as you fly it, so to speak, and think, oh, we need the inclusion part now. Do that well before you start recruiting. So part of that preparation in the workplace to make sure it's not only inclusive but psychologically safe would be have a talk to your team. So if you are the CEO, prepare the C-suite, make sure they're on board and the C-suite understand what the mission is, what the goal is. Yeah. But then make sure the broader organisation, and whether that's disability awareness training or cultural awareness training, make sure you are taking people on the journey and setting them up for success, because nobody in a workplace wants to feel like they've offended or hurt somebody else, especially a new staff member, unintentionally, because they weren't trained and they haven't developed the understanding or the knowledge that they need to play a part in creating an inclusive and psychologically safe workplace. So for me, it would be really communicating really clearly to the team about what you're about to embark on. There's a huge change management piece there as well. Yeah. And prepare the workplace and prepare everybody in a way where you all feel like you're at the same level of understanding around what is appropriate language, what are appropriate workplace practices. Do we need to have workplace modifications in place because we're welcoming 5 people with a physical disability? Really just opening the team's eyes up to what the workplace will look like now, and also taking them on the journey of why it's just such a brilliant thing to be doing.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, a lot of some of the potential problems with people embracing any sort of change is understanding, isn't it? Understanding the value, yeah. Educating and kind of helping people see the bigger picture and how it's going to benefit them during the potential bumpy moments of the transition. So that's really good. Educating people is a key thing. And it, like you say, why are we doing this? Isn't it? You have to communicate. Why are we doing this? What is the benefit to the company? It's going to affect my day. Everybody thinks of themselves, don't they? How's it going to affect me?
Oh yeah.
And it's like, yeah. Why should I do this and this? And I guess the other part will be address kind of prejudices and things like that people bring. Sort of the greatest asset to a company is people, and the greatest liability potentially is people as well, isn't it? If the attitude and the perspectives are not as helpful as they should and as embracing as they should. And I guess that all comes into the education side of it. And that sort of really dovetails also into the psychologically safe culture as well, doesn't it? Are people open that they can be honest and share in a respectful way, using the right language and terminology, like you say, but also like, I've actually got an issue with this because something, and not feel that I just can't say that because, you know, what people are going to think and all the rest of it. There's ways of doing it, I know, and you have to navigate that on an individual basis, I would have thought. But what would be some of the things for a leader that's thinking, I'm not getting through to the team like I know I could, like I'd like to, like they deserve, maybe, if they're that honest. How can people take the steps to start creating the culture that accepts differences of opinions, and then sort of broaden that out to maybe different types of employees or employee needs that we're accommodating?
Lead by example. So that congruence piece for me is always a big one. You have leaders saying one thing and doing something different, and then you hear the chatter with the employees going, well, he said this, but he's doing that. He's doing the opposite. So really having that congruence, knowing that almost, and I hate to liken employees to children with their parents, but they watch everything you do. Yeah. And so if you're not walking the talk and leading by example and having that congruence, then you cannot expect, your staff to do anything different to what you're doing. So I think be really mindful that you are leading the way. It doesn't matter if you're a team leader or a CEO. If you're in any type of leadership position, you're going to have one or more people looking up to you, and you want them to be role modeling those right behaviours. Psychological safety is such a big one. I've done so much work with people who have been really traumatized by their experiences in the workplace. And I've also, in the coaching space, but also do a lot of work with leaders in the consulting space around, don't make these mistakes. You don't want to have the reputation in the marketplace that you tolerate bullying, or you have a particularly toxic culture, workplace culture. And so for me, it would be, again, making sure all the leaders are on board. You're all going to have different personalities because we're unique, individuals, and we bring our own perspectives and things to the table. But making sure, if you are the CEO, there's a zero tolerance to certain behaviours. And also, what are the behaviours you want to see mirrored and people demonstrating in the workplace, especially when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion. But I think it's really explaining to them, getting the leaders, and this is something I do in the diversity, equity, inclusion space, is having the leaders at every single level think about a time when they were excluded, when they were bullied, when they were not heard. Bullying doesn't always look like we think it does. It can be very subtle, and it can be over a period of time, a long period of time. It can be subtle exclusion, or talking over somebody all the time, or somebody just not feeling heard. And they might translate that to, well, that's because I come from a different cultural background, or I have a different skin color, or I'm a woman, or whatever it might be. But I think, that there needs to be a lot of self-awareness as well. With leaders, but also with your teams. So if you're learning something about yourself as a leader, try and talk to your teams, be open with your teams about, I know that I'm not particularly good at A, B, and C, and be a little bit vulnerable. Tell your team, look, guys, I know I'm not, great in this space. I get carried away and I get excited and I run off with strategy, and, you guys might need more time, or you might need more support. And I've realized I'm not that great at it, but I need you to help me get better, and I need you to help me understand that more. Just be vulnerable as a leader. That actually works to build trust and rapport so quickly. And you would know this in your work as well. People love a leader that's a human and relatable. So there would be some of the things, and they are some of the things that I work with on leaders, because sometimes they don't even have the awareness of those basic things I've just mentioned. It sounds like common sense, but when you're tied up in knots doing, just your job, and you sort of have the blinkers on day to day, you might not have that. You might not have that realization or acknowledge your own behaviors yet. So sometimes getting people to just stop for a minute, reflect, and think about their own behaviors and leadership styles, they can sort of go, oh, okay, you're holding a mirror up to them sometimes.
Yeah, that's really good. And that points back to one of the key points you mentioned right near the start about valuing people by giving them time and seeing it as an investment into the relationship. Because like a lot of the time, like the C-suite particularly, there's a lot of pressure. They're carrying lots of different things, and it would be easy to embrace I haven't got time for small talk, I haven't got time for conversations. What they're really saying is, I haven't got time for the people stuff. I need to hit the targets. I need to this and it's like, it's the people that help you get to the targets, isn't it? There's a balance to that as well, but I really like the way you've put it. The whole self-awareness aspect is huge. I remember a while back I was leading a team where I didn't know them that well. We'd not been together that long. Very high stressful scenario we had to sort of deal with for a day or two, and I literally, thankfully, I'd learned by that point, and just said, when I'm concentrating, I look very serious. I really enjoy what I'm doing. So if I talk to you and ask you to do something and I'm not smiling, don't take it personally. It's just it's not reached my face yet, shall we say. But just communicating that, it stops certain things building up, or people, you know, taking things the wrong way or whatever. And it's just like, no, I'm just focused on something that I need to do, and I don't want to tread on anyone in the process. So, you know, bear with me with that. And that's so kind of liberating from my perspective. It doesn't give me an excuse to just go around, you know, not smiling and not taking the time for the people aspect. But it's a step, isn't it, in helping people understand who I am, where I'm still working on certain areas, and hopefully it won't trip them up in what they need to do. Such a key thing. Yeah, I think if we can get that right balance of vulnerability over a consistent period, people get to know you, and it's like, okay, yeah, I can run with that, because I understand that deep down, he's for me, they're for me, you know, they want my success in the process. I think that's absolutely. I think the whole thing about inclusion, as well as it might be sort of, you know, people that have identify as a different gender maybe, or from different background, ethnic group, however you want to kind of use that term, it's also just including people to have an input, even if they're very similar to you as well. They might not be from a completely different kind of area of society or group or people group, however you want to put it. I don't want to get in the weeds and the minefields of trying to explain it too deeply, but just everybody's different, but including them for who they are, and what the value they can bring is really good. So this is all good stuff. I knew it would. And I think it's a key thing, like you say, just check in every now and again and review where you are. It's like, because like the thing about culture is you don't create it once and then it just carries on. You have to kind of nurture it, build it, develop it, keep it strong, don't you? And one of the ways of doing that is to consistently show up, be aware of how you're showing up, and sort of stay as consistent as you can with that. What would be some of the other things, because I get the opportunity to ask you, what are some of the other aspects of kind of strengthening that culture? So say we're in a good place for a company, we've got a good team, we've educated, we understand, we're recruiting, reaching out to lots of different ideas, different viewpoints, which we're allowing a voice at the table of discussion maybe. How do we then stop ourselves from closing everything down and going back to how we were?
I always touch.
I know.
Yeah, it is a big question. Well, it's like anybody that's, you know, I was talking to someone yesterday and she said to me, I asked her to rate her future goals out of 10. She said 9. And I said, oh, that's great. Just out of curiosity, why didn't you do 10 out of 10? Like this is aspirational. She said, well, because I don't want to fail. Like 10 is that's almost perfectionism. I thought, wow, talk about learned helplessness as human beings. Like we learn that, well, once you get to a 10, there's nowhere else to go but to maintain a 10, or to maintain that pinnacle of, well, we've reached our goal. What do we do now? That maintenance is just as important. And I guess that's related to your question, is not being complacent. And that's what I have seen organisations do, this huge turnaround. They finally recognise that their culture was really toxic. They're losing talent. They start to rebuild essentially. And in the meantime, you know, their clients or their customers have suffered, because when you have such high turnover, you know, who suffers? Your clients, especially if you're a charity or a non-profit. The people that are most disadvantaged suffer. So I have seen a lot of companies do that, and then they reach that sort of pinnacle of, great, look where we've come. And it's like, don't forget the journey. And so I try and attach feelings to everything when it's goal oriented. It's remember the feelings of where you were. And I usually get people right at the beginning of the journey to write 3 feelings. What is the feeling now? And rate it out of 10. Whether you're an organisation, whether you're an individual looking for employment, whatever your situation is. And then what your feelings will be once you've achieved that goal, and in whatever time frame. And so we do this reflection piece, and it's, you need to remember where you are now and how you're feeling, and hold on to that, because how devastating it will be if things slip backwards. But for me, it's really speaking to the leaders and telling them about that concept of complacency. So especially around psychological safety. the damage and trauma you can cause to a human being. So, and that is a genuine concern. And so when you talk to leaders, they've gone through this whole journey. Usually their emotional intelligence is much better, their self-awareness is much better, and what they don't want is to, traumatize people in their workplace because things become unstuck. And so it's putting measures in place. So governance, making sure that they've got the right governance, that they also have. If you're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, do they have working groups? It doesn't, making sure that the whole team knows that this great journey doesn't just end here. What we do now is we have a LGBTQI, a working group, and they're part of the, events committee. And on certain days of the year, we're going to celebrate diversity inclusion that way, gender diversity. We're going to celebrate cultural diversity through Refugee Week. We've got Refugee Week here in Australia. So it's really marking things out where you can not only continue the journey and continue to improve, but celebrate now. So you've got to that 10 out of 10, but it's now, okay, well, how do we continually recognise and celebrate the diversity and the inclusion in our workplace? What's that going to look like? What sort of initiatives are we going to put in place? Having things like working groups and governance groups to make sure that we stay on track, and we do things like employee surveys quite regularly to make sure that we're getting that feedback from employees to understand that we're still, where we need to be. And also, I say, when it comes to recruiting and bringing new people into this new improved culture, hire for cultural fit. You can teach technical skills. That is my one piece of advice. Yeah. You've worked really hard on building this culture or rebuilding this culture. Now you know the personal attributes or leadership attributes, or a mixture of both, that you need. Really be mindful of that when you're recruiting for people, and see the red flags in the recruitment process when people say particular things. But I always say, you recruit for cultural fit, you can teach technical skills later. You can't teach adults behaviours. It's really hard when you talk about behaviour change when it comes to adults. So again, there's lots there.
Absolutely. No, it's good. Yeah. I like it because it's one of those, you've kind of given us the concentrated version, so we can listen to the episode multiple times. I listen back to episodes more than once, definitely, because I don't catch everything the first time, and there's stuff you want to chew on and kind of digest a bit more, and just pick certain bits out that you need at that point, which is really good. I think one of the dangers is we get to that level you're on about, we maybe win an award for being diverse and all the rest of it, and then it's like, done that, just carry on as normal. Now we don't kind of maintain what we were doing beforehand, or, as you say, start doing newish initiatives. I like the picture you give of sort of 1 to 10. If you get to 10, like, you then go to 11, don't you, which is the next level up, but you start at 1. So it's like, once you're at 11, you then start initiatives or something that's going to take the company forward, raise the awareness even more, kind of reinforce what you've already built on the first layer, and then get more people involved. Like you say, don't dilute it by getting the wrong sorts of new recruits in that's going to take you backwards rather than forwards. Lots of wisdom there. Thank you for everything that you've shared. We are right near the end of the episode, but how can people sort of touch base with regards to elevated coaching if they want to find more about consultancy for sort of the diversity aspect, the inclusion aspect, or just have a bit more of a conversation based on what we've said? Best way for people to touch base with you?
Best way would be head on over to our website, which is elevatedconsulting.net. And there's a little form there if you want to have a discovery call with myself or one of my practitioners. Just fill that out and it pops into my inbox, and we can make a time to have a chat further. Brilliant.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds really good. Very practical, very straightforward, which is what we like. No fluff. We know exactly what we need to do. If we're honest with ourselves, and we raise our level of self-awareness, and getting the external input is also such a key thing, isn't it? We can be in an environment for so long, not realize a lot of the red flags, not realize a lot of what we're doing because we're in it. Whereas you get someone in from outside and they can just hit things straight away. You save so much time and money and all the rest of it. So that's really good. So keep up the good work, keep doing what you're doing and helping people like you are. Certainly making the world a better place, which is what it's all about, isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate, for those that don't know, Kylie got up very early this morning to do this recording. So we really appreciate that as well. And you're very sharp and very on the ball as well. So that's all good. Really appreciate your time. For everybody listening as well, don't let this be just another podcast that you listen to and then go on to something else. Go back over it, pick one or two things, ask yourself, book a session with yourself as well, and just ask yourself a few questions. Where am I actually doing well? Where am I not doing so well when it comes to diversity, inclusion, psychological safety, and who can I get to help me in the process of moving things forward? Certainly reach out to Kylie and her team, have a conversation, see what the next step is for you with that. Make sure you do something with this. Let the episode live in your company. Don't let it die and just be one of those things you skip on to the next thing and don't do anything about it, because that isn't going to help you. And that's not what we're here for either. So always encourage people to take action, because we believe in you and we believe in your potential. Thank you for sharing your time with us today. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you on the next episode. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Yeukai Business Show. We will be back to bring you more episodes with success stories and advice straight from the experts. Want more? Check out www.yeukai.businessshow.com. Get your free trial of our virtual assistant service today. Just visit www.worldoutsourcingsolutions.com. Quote WOS18 or send us an email at support@worldoutsourcingsolutions.com.